digital is always changing. There's something new. There's going to be a new technology, a new channel. There's always going to be new ways to shop. So omnichannel is just going to get bigger and bigger and broader and more complex. And being brilliant at the basics will always be the most important part, because who knows if there's going to be a new TikTok one day. But whatever that is, there will be a new channel and consumers will have a different way to shop. So if you have the foundation of your data, your systems, then you can pivot when those changes come.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Human in the Loop. My name is Cameron Yoder and today I'm joined by Lauren, and today we're covering an interesting range of topics. Lauren will get into her experience. She will talk a bit about her experience, but she can largely speak to a pretty wide range of sellers. She's been involved with very large brands and also brands that are just starting out, and she has some really good perspective on the current state of selling across the board. And so we talk about the state of selling. We also talk about omni-channel, so different advantages for expanding into across different marketplaces, her experience helping brands do that, brands of all sizes again. And also we have some really good discussions over AI and just how it's not just a fad. And she has had a lot of experience again working with brands to successfully implement AI to grow at scale. And so today's conversation, my goal is all about pulling all this out of Lauren, and Lauren has some incredible things to say and incredible value to add. So let's get started with Lauren. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Human in the Loop. Today, I am joined by Lauren Livak, and we're discussing the intersection of omnichannel and artificial intelligence and how both of those key areas are really essential for selling, for growing today's e-commerce environment. They're both really heavy subjects in their own right. And Lauren, I'm curious to kind of pick your brain on both of those areas. But before we dive into omnichannel and artificial intelligence, I think it'd be great to give people some context for who you are. So if you can, just break down a little bit of your experience, and then after that, we'll dive right in.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Cameron. And I have to say, I love the name of the podcast because I think humans at the center of everything. And sometimes we forget about that when we build out strategies. We're all people. We all need to figure out how to work together and do this together. So I love the name. But thank you for having me.
Of course.
So Lauren Livak Gilbert, I lead the Digital Shelf Institute, also known as the DSI, if you hear me refer to that. So it's really an industry community focused on bringing brand manufacturers together, creating content, helping brands do their job better. So how can we identify problems, challenges, build best practices to be able to help them advance their goals and their careers at their organization? But I come from the brand world. So I used to work at Johnson & Johnson, where I led the digital shelf. This was pre-COVID, so when not as many people thought e-commerce was important. A lot more knocking on doors at the time, but I built out a strategy and a team, went through kind of upskilling around e-commerce and the digital shelf. So I really have my brand hat on a lot as I'm thinking through things. And most of my time during the week is talking to brand manufacturers as well.
Yep, I love that. I think that's really good context. And it's also good context. I mean, omnichannel is a really big topic right now, and your perspective on omnichannel is really important here. I'll also link information to the DSI for people to, I think it's a great way to stay plugged into everything in e-commerce and to follow you. So I'll plug that in the show notes. I think that a good place to start in this conversation is kind of the current state of selling. Like you said, you've been plugged in for a long time, for a while. So I am honestly just very curious to get your perspective on some of the biggest challenges that you see sellers facing right now. Different people with different perspective answer this differently, which is why I think it's a great question to lead with. So what do you think? What are brands really struggling with today?
I would have to say, I think there's more struggles than in the past for brands today. The top one being profitability. And I would actually say that's a challenge for brands and for retailers because of the economy that we're in, right? Like we're all feeling it personally, professionally. There's a lot of challenges around profitability, and brands are trying to figure out how to reach consumers. Retailers are trying to figure out how to bring those consumers in. So that really provides an environment where both brands and retailers need to get creative, but also it opens up opportunities for them to work smarter and have the right org structures, bring in the right data to be able to support that. So profitability at its core, I think, is like one of the biggest challenges. But I think because of that and because of the challenges that brands are facing, things like operating in an omni-channel way is a really big challenge.
Yeah.
You have large organizations that have worked the same way and been structured the same way, air quotes, mostly for the past like 100, 150 years, right?
Yep.
You have the in-store sales team, you have the e-commerce team, they don't talk to each other. But as a consumer, you and I, Cameron, we're not going, okay, I'm going to buy on this channel today, or I'm going to buy on this channel today. We're just saying, we want to go buy some sneakers. Where can we find them?
Yep.
You know, so,
and we trust the marketplace that we buy on, right? We're not going to buy from an untrusted one, but yeah, we're looking at the price of the product and reviews, and that's mostly it.
Exactly. But we're not looking at channels. So
no,
organizations, brands need to figure out how to work internally to support that consumer journey. And that is not easy. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's a really big challenge. And then I think another really big one is data. So I talk a lot about this every week with brands, and they come to me and they say, we have all of this data. There's not a lack of data, but we don't know what to do with it, or we don't know how to bring it together in a holistic view to influence our strategy. Because of the challenges with profitability and the way that consumers are shopping, brands need data to inform them how they should be going to market, on which channel, in which way, with which story to get to the consumer. But they need data to be able to inform that. And there's so many different data sets. There's your in-store data, your online data, there's retail media halo effects and how that affects other channels. So there's just so many different data points. And right now, a big challenge is bringing them together and understanding, what is the data actually telling me? And then how should I take that and apply it to my overall strategy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think roadblocks used to be accessibility to data, and accessibility even to going on to different marketplaces and omnichannel. And those two areas really have been kind of democratized. Like, it's easier than ever to get on to more than one marketplace. And it's not easy for everyone. But at the same time, it's easier than ever to have access to that data as well. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to interpret that data. So I think that that's really interesting that both of those gates have been opened, but that brands are still coming to you saying, hey, I don't really know what to do with this. But the brands that do know what to do with it are really, really benefiting strategically
100%
from that.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the brands that have built out analytics teams and have internal clean rooms that are pairing all the data together, they're the first movers in this space.
Absolutely.
And they have amazing insights. But you made a really good point. We've gone through this kind of maturity curve of data where it's, we don't have any data. We have some data. We have too much data. We don't know what to do with our data. So we're kind of going through that process now. And I think retailers are also opening up a lot more data. It's slower than I think brands might like it to be, but I think the retailers are understanding, if I provide data to the brands, they will invest more because they're understanding my return on investment.
Absolutely. They'll do better. They'll perform better. They'll spend more money with us in our marketplace. So
everyone will do better.
Yeah, I know. Kind of a second part of this, I think you hit on a lot of really big key areas that brands are feeling today. Do you see those changes and challenges evolving? Like profitability, you go back a couple of years, profitability wasn't as big as a main focus as it is now, partly because of maybe some economic pressure, data again, and people's kind of really, really going towards the bottom line, like how do I maintain profitability here? Do you think profitability in omnichannel will still be challenges over the next couple of years? Do you think other challenges will pop up? What do you think?
Well, I wish I was an economist and could tell you what's going to happen, because then I would be living on a private island somewhere and knowing the future. But I'm assuming the economy will take some time to kind of level out, and consumers are still going to be a bit more conservative in how they're purchasing. So I think that will continue on at least this year and into next year. I think the challenge that will always continue, well, maybe two things. One, digital is always changing. There's something new. There's going to be a new technology, a new channel. There's always going to be new ways to shop. So omni-channel is just going to get bigger and bigger and broader and more complex. And you'll hear me say this when I talk on a lot of different events, but being brilliant at the basics will always be the most important part.
Love that.
Because who knows if there's going to be a new TikTok one day, or I don't know, come up with some other social media, or maybe the metaverse will eventually take off. Who knows? But whatever that is, there will be a new channel and consumers will have a different way to shop. So I think omni-channel will just begin to continue to expand. But that's a really big challenge for brands, to the points I was talking about before. They need to really get more connected internally to get ready for that, because no one will necessarily be able to predict it. But if you have the foundation of your org structures, your process, your data, your systems, then you can pivot when those changes come.
Yeah.
But if you don't focus on those things, then you can't.
It's starting at the foundation of your business, the operational excellence, almost priming you, getting you ready for whatever, who knows what's in the future, but getting you ready for whatever that is. That operational excellence, unlocking your ability to do that, or at least increasing your chances of being able to do that profitably and successfully.
Exactly. And that's not the shiny stuff, you know, it might be the air quote boring stuff, but it's the important stuff. If you don't have that in place, and we'll talk about this when we talk about AI, when AI comes out, you can't do anything with AI if you don't have the right data.
Right.
Because garbage in is garbage out, right? So those foundational pieces just need to be put in place in order to succeed in any of the new channels.
That's good. Well, now that we've kind of identified problem, let's kind of dive into each of these areas, right? Omnichannel and AI. You already touched on this, but I think it might be good to reiterate a point or two. But why is omnichannel so important for brands today? So a lot of brands, a lot of e-commerce based brands that I know, and maybe you'll mix retail into this as well, but a lot of e-commerce brands have always been on Amazon. Some tested out Walmart a couple years ago and then it failed and they're like, should I try it again? I don't know, I'm hesitant. But this conversation on omnichannel, I think brands have been hearing like, do it without a really thorough explanation of like, here's why it's really important to do omnichannel. What are your thoughts on why it is essential?
Because you need to be where your consumers are, and they're everywhere. I mean, I think that's the simplest answer, right? But I think the challenge that brands have is there's a lot of noise in digital, right? We just talked about that. There's like a lot of trends, there's a lot of channels. And so oftentimes brands are like, let's just do everything, or like, let's throw it on every different channel. But I think taking a step back and understanding your consumer so well. Where do they shop? Why do they shop there? What do they want to know about your product? How do they want to engage with your product? Do they want to do buy online, pick up in store? Would they rather go straight to online? Just really understanding the consumer will answer that omni-channel question for you.
Yeah.
And previously, I think maybe in the past 5 years or so, as e-commerce has really accelerated after COVID, a lot of brands just put their entire portfolio on every channel. But I think people are taking a step back now and saying, hey, what should I be selling online?
Yeah.
Because the answer is not every product, because not every product is profitable online, right? If you have a 37-pound, that's not how much laundry detergent weighs, but if it was 37 pounds in a box, it would not be profitable to ship, right? Or if you're selling one individual face mask for $1, it's not profitable to just ship a single face mask, right? So it's important for brands to understand what should I be selling online and why, and how should I be doing that to get to the right consumer. And I think sometimes it's very, very easy to get lost in just the strategy and mapping it out. But at the end of the day, the consumer is the one that's really dictating a lot of this. So how can you anchor back into that?
This may be I think we could go deep on this if we wanted to. We certainly don't have to. But how do you see brands doing that well in terms of figuring out, how to prioritize certain marketplaces over others? Like TikTok is obviously hot right now. Maybe not every brand should just go gung-ho on TikTok. Maybe some should. But how do you know which marketplace to kind of try for and integrate first? And also which products to go for? How have you seen brands do that successfully?
Oh, that is a complex answer,
I know
but
it's heavy.
I will try to hit the high notes here. I mean, I think that one of the kind of not exciting pieces of this is to actually just look at your portfolio and look at your sales numbers and say what's profitable online and what's not. And if it's not, don't sell it online, at the very, very basic level.
Yeah.
I think the other example is really engaging with your shopper marketing teams, your category management teams, your revenue growth management teams, and understanding who your consumer is. An example, I can't share the name of the brand, but it was an example of a brand's tactic that shifted that I thought was really interesting. They used to sell mostly on Amazon. And with the change after COVID and with the economy shifting, they noticed that a lot of their consumers were actually going to Walmart because Walmart has more of that like best price guarantee kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. So they actually saw a huge shift in their customers going to Walmart for a specific product. And so they shifted their ad dollars there and they shifted their strategy. They didn't stop selling on Amazon, but they shifted how they were going to market with Walmart. The same with other brands and club. Huge value, right? Buying in bulk. There's potential to save money. That might not have been a channel for a lot of brands previously, but in the economic environment that we're in, they may have a huge opportunity on the club channel, and they're thinking about gift packs and all kinds of opportunities to sell more products there. So I think it's really just staying in tune with what your consumer wants, what's happening in the atmosphere. But even more important is being able to be flexible inside your organization to shift that. And that means having the right reporting structure, talking to finance so you can move money around for the P&L, right? Like there's so many different aspects internally where organizations are not necessarily set up to be able to do that, but the ones that are thinking about working cross-functionally, breaking down the silos between all those different functions are the ones who can actually become omnichannel.
That's
and
good.
It's not easy. It's easy for me to say these sentences, but it's not easy to do. It takes a lot of change inside an organization.
Yeah, of course. I think, the prep work before and during trying to integrate, like you mentioned, trying to understand where your customer is. I think there's, go back to the very first part of our conversation is kind of the democratization of data, not just internal, but for marketplaces as well. You have a better ability to understand where customers are, or what types of customers are on a place like Walmart compared to Amazon, like the great value shoppers, grocery shoppers going to Walmart, perhaps more than Amazon. I think there's some work that can be done to reemphasize your point too, that brands can do before they test out to kind of gauge how likely they are to succeed. But that's interesting.
100%.
So what channels do you think brands should, this again, it's hard to answer for every person, right? So I'm gonna preface that for you. I'm gonna make sure to protect you with this with that.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
No right answer.
there is no right answer. But what do you think brands should consider prioritizing for growth when it comes to omnichannel right now?
Well, I'm going to answer that in a kind of roundabout way based on something you just said. And I think it's through a test and learn mindset. So you're right. Not every brand should be on TikTok. It just doesn't work for everyone, right? But not every brand should be on Amazon or Walmart, so I think it's really testing and learning, but doing that in a very strategic way. So not just kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and saying, hey, we're going to throw these products up here. Actually do a test and learn for a month. See what consumers are saying. Are you getting insights? Is there a big spike in sales? Like really having a specific plan about what that looks like. And e-commerce has been around for long enough that it's very clear who the big players are in each category, right? So in electronics versus grocery, you know who the big retailers are where you should be placing your bets. So try it out and see if it works for you. But take a very data-driven and strategic approach to do that. And I think the other element is do that in collaboration with the teams in your organization that are experts. And what I mean by that is if you're in the sales team or you're in the marketing team or you're in the e-commerce team, you need to have category management involved. You need to have shopper involved if you have shopper. You need revenue growth management, R&D. Like all of those functions need to provide perspective to you because they know your category and your products really well. And I think sometimes brands don't necessarily tap into the resources inside their organization to identify those overall priorities.
That's so funny that you'd imagine that that would be a pretty core piece of people's processes before executing on something like Omnichannel. But I say that, and I've probably done the same thing myself a million times.
You don't know what you don't know,
Of
right?
course.
Like, I remember being when I was leading the digital shelf, and he'll laugh at this if he's listening to this. I didn't know my eCatman lead for months. I didn't even know that he existed, right? Because it's a big organization. And if you don't get connected, then there's no way to be able to know what you don't know, right? So I think it's just important to understand who are all the functions that could be involved in digital, and like, let's go find them if they exist, especially in very big organizations. In smaller organizations, it's much easier, right? Because you wear many hats. But I think then it's even more collaborative that everyone just has to be in the room.
Yep.
Because if you're running a retail media campaign on something that you're not building out your content for, it can just be a big challenge.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good. I think one other thing that comes to my mind when a brand is thinking about, or an organization is thinking about another channel, is to actually kind of go in with the mindset of a consumer. So if you go on TikTok and you watch TikToks, I don't know how many people that are listening to this watch TikTok. I don't know, Lauren, are you on TikTok?
I do not
Really?
have it. I have to say.
No, wow, that's
I do not have TikTok.
That's rare. Wow.
If I need to look at it, I go through my friend's TikTok, but I personally do not have TikTok.
Don't get on. It's too addicting. I swear. I'm a part of this. I contribute to the addiction of TikTok. But if you go on from a consumer mindset and you're just like, I'm just going to go on and check what e-commerce is like on there. I'm just going to watch content and see what's happening. It's very interesting to see, and this is kind of getting into the AI discussion in the sense of just progression and new ways of doing things. This new wave of e-commerce, like a lot of these brands that are running high numbers are starting on TikTok and then branching into Amazon or Walmart or wherever it is. And it's just a different way of doing things. I think I say that to say getting into the mindset of a consumer and just going in to observe, I think is another really good way also to kind of think through the process of, okay, maybe which marketplace should I try next?
100%. And I don't think it's like a 1, 2, 3 step. You need to do it in this order. To your point, there are a lot of brands that have started on TikTok, and TikTok Shop is much more seamless than it was previously. So there's a huge opportunity to be able to do that. But what you see is you might have a brand that starts on TikTok and maybe they have just direct to consumer, and then they want to go in store, right? So they need to learn some of the fundamentals of being in store, or you have an in-store brand that's going online. So you can come at it from very different directions, but I think the challenge is there's so many nuances to all of the different channels. So making sure when you're getting into that channel, you understand, like, what does the consumer look for? What do they want? How are they shopping? Because it's just so different between each of them.
It is. And your point of operational excellence, again, is a really good defense against the stresses that come with that. Let's talk about AI now. I'm curious to get your perspective on this. There are a lot of different ways we could approach this. So we could have AI be its own episode, honestly, but because there's so much with it. But how do you see, I think historically the conversation has been hypothetical. It's getting much more tangible today. How do you see AI tangibly making an impact on buyers and sellers today?
So I think about it in kind of 2 buckets. I think the first bucket is it's changing how we work. And I think the second bucket is it's changing how consumers shop. So from a how we work perspective, it provides much more scale. I mean, anyone who's listening to this who's on an e-commerce team wishes they had like 15 more people as resources, but that's just not feasible, right? So it can help you do more at scale, write more content, update more imagery, update your PDPs, scale your retail media. There's just a huge opportunity for that. It also makes you more efficient. So I think efficiency and scale are 2 of the biggest pieces. And I think, to your point, those are the biggest areas I'm actually seeing tangible change right now. How can we update our search terms or our titles or overall PDP updating from an AI perspective? So I think that is really critical. But if you don't have the right data, you can't do that. So another caveat to being brilliant at the basics. So I think that's kind of how it's changing how we work. But it's also changing how consumers are shopping. So It's not as prevalent quite yet, but I know Amazon has Rufus, the AI assistant. Walmart just came out with a different search with AI.
Yep.
So it's more of the mission-based kind of searches where it's things like, I need to buy a Valentine's Day gift, and it shows you chocolate, and it shows you maybe alcohol and teddy bears and multiple different things that wouldn't be in the same category, but would be connected to that specific mission. And that's more how consumers shop, right? A lot of times they're like, oh, I need toiletries for travel. And it would be amazing to see all the little small sizes so that you can purchase those rather than individually going and buying a travel shampoo or a travel lotion. So it's changing how consumers shop and therefore affecting how brands need to operate internally, right? I think it's kind of that life cycle where if you have more mission-based shopping, you need to include that information in your content on the product detail page, so that when AI is scraping it for the content, it shows up, right? So it's really a kind of flywheel effect there.
Yeah, that call and response, like how the marketplaces themselves integrate AI kind of will determine, I feel like, how brands respond on the PDP, or even Amazon's. I've used the Amazon's feature for their new ask a question, like you ask the AI or a question about the product. I honestly love it, but it scrapes from reviews and the information on the product page. That's huge. I think
that can also be a little scary though, right? Because the brand doesn't necessarily control the reviews. And Amazon is also using AI to fill out product detail page information if the brand didn't. And that is a big challenge because brands want to control the narrative of their brand. And if they can't do that, then it could be represented incorrectly. So I think it's causing a lot of urgency for brands, but to that end, it's also really hard to implement AI in a large organization, especially in regulatory environments. So if you're selling like over-the-counter medication or basically anything that you eat or ingest, right? There's a lot of regulatory and legal that goes into that. Coming from that category, I know specifically. And so getting your legal teams or regulatory teams understanding how you're using AI, where you're using it, it will take a lot of change inside large organizations to be able to support that. And I think that's what's taking some of the time from an adoption standpoint.
I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense to me. You've mentioned, so a big preface that you gave before was data and its integration with AI. So talk to me about that. Is that the AI aiding in the digestion of that data and helping brands leverage that data? What does that look like today?
Specifically, what I meant by that is like when you're thinking about the mission-based shopping. So if you say, I don't know why sneakers keep popping into my head, but let's say you want to buy a pair of sneakers, but they have red soles. Okay, so I'm a sneaker company and my sneakers have red soles, but I haven't written red sole in my title or my paragraph or my bullets or any of the taxonomy or nodes that came along with setting up my product detail page on Amazon or Walmart or Target. When you type that into the AI assistant on any of those retailer sites and they don't see the word red sole, your product will not be provided to the consumer who's searching for the product. That's what I mean by the connection of data to AI. If you do not supply AI with the data, they cannot showcase your product. So another really good example of this that's very close to my heart because I am gluten-free is gluten-free. So if you do not write that your product is gluten-free, and I've actually seen this a lot on like bars and things, they write wheat-free, and I never search for that. I search for gluten-free. If that isn't listed on your packaging, in your title, if it isn't part of the search taxonomy that I can check about. Exactly. And so AI can't recommend a product they don't know about, right? So that's the data component. If you are not accurately feeding AI your data, they can't surface that information to the consumer. I mean, I don't know if you've used the ChatGPT to Instacart connection. It's pretty cool. It can actually make a like meal plan for you and then put the items in your cart.
Incredible. It's incredible.
But it's not putting 7 different types of oatmeal in there or different types of tomatoes. It's just picking one.
Right.
And how is it picking that? based on the data that's provided. So that's what I mean by that connection point. If you don't have that data right, you can't really utilize the AI in the way that you want it to surface those products to your consumers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to continue kind of this conversation for like how people can adopt AI in a realistic way. So we're starting from, of course, everyone's going to be at a different point in their business, and we're talking to a range of sizes here. But realistically, let's just kind of assume that people are dabbling in AI, and maybe they've used ChatGPT to like distill text down to simple or like rewrite text in some way. How do you think e-commerce businesses should be integrating AI in an accessible way to create change today? What does that look like?
First, I would say don't just do it to do it. I think a lot of brands are like, oh, we need to use AI, so we're just going to put it in and we're going to adopt it. No. Have a very, very clear definition and goal and or value that it's driving to the business. So I think that's number one. I think the second piece is similar to what we were talking about in terms of what channel you should be selling on. Test and learn, right? Yeah. Start small, use the agile methodology, create an MVP, start with just a little project and see if it works and then expand from there. But also get the right people involved. So I've seen a lot of organizations create things like AI councils where they're bringing in all the different functions that might want to use AI or anyone who has expertise around AI, and they're bringing them together to have a conversation and just say, hey, what have you tried? Or what are you using? Or where do we see this fitting in the org? Because AI is not going to live in just one function. It can live in multiple different functions, and it's new for everyone, right? At least Gen AI is new for everyone. Yes. So how can you take the collective learnings internally and just get smarter together? So that's one thing I'm really seeing brands do.
And those are people internally from different departments within the organization. Yeah.
Marketing, sales, supply chain, R&D, legal, finance. I mean, you can use AI in so many different ways. And even if maybe your supply chain team is using it differently than your marketing team, they might know something about how to get it approved in your organization or like how it integrates with an internal system. So you're just taking that knowledge, and to your point, you're democratizing it across the organization. So everyone isn't starting from square one, and you're just kind of sharing that across the board.
That's great.
And I mean, in e-commerce in general, I think the big opportunities around content.
Definitely.
It's around writing content, producing content, adding in search terms. And there's even AI around like visuals. How can you understand who's looking at what parts of your imagery? So I think the product detail page itself is the biggest opportunity from an AI perspective.
Yeah, the content is an interesting thing. I think it's also probably, text, disregarding text, imagery and whatnot, and content in general is, I think, the biggest area still for improvement when it comes to something like ChatGPT, but that's improving very rapidly. And I think that the contents, I think maybe people are kicking the can a little bit further down the road just because they're like, oh, it's not quite there yet. And so because of that, I'll just kind of put that off the back burner. But I think the change and improvement in content itself, AI generated content, imagery specifically, I think it'll happen pretty rapidly. And I think people who don't try to start integrating processes for that, honestly, might get left behind. Again, from those we're talking early adopters as well. I think there's a lot to be said for those early adopters, at least testing things out to understand the process. But I'm speculating.
Totally agree. Yeah.
I'm speculating. So this is kind of the last question, and this is a speculation question. So again, there's no
Don't hold me to it.
I won't hold you to it. We're just having fun guesses here about the future of everything. How do you think AI is going to evolve and change? How do you think AI will change in the way that e-commerce sellers, retail use AI will change as well?
Oh, this is a funny one based on what you were just saying, but I can't wait to see AI be able to make hands look the right way in imagery. Yeah. Have you ever tried to have AI generate what a hand looks like? I think
fingers.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So that's an aside. But I really do think it will fundamentally change search. To me, that's the biggest area where it is going to change how organizations are going to have to operate to better help the consumer find the products they're looking for. So more of that like mission-based search that I was talking about, where you're saying, hey, I'm going on a trip and I need these products, or collectively grouping things together around, I need to buy a gift for Valentine's Day, whatever that looks like. I think that is going to be the biggest shift. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but I do think that it will start to continuously grow and become more of the standard. But to your point, for anyone who's kind of kicking the can down the road, if you don't have the fundamentals in place and you wait to do that to be able to support it, you're not going to be able to keep up with it. So I think that is going to be the biggest change across AI in terms of how it's used in the shopping journey. And I just think that, I mean, there was even a recent study that was done around how search is just going to change between different platforms and how it's going to be used on a Google versus an Amazon versus a YouTube and how you search for products. I think that's the biggest shift we're going to see. And I don't know if anyone really knows when that's going to happen or how big it's going to be, but it's definitely going to be a change for brands because it means that you have to have exactly the right content that the consumer is searching for in order to showcase your products.
The perspective to add on to that, I think you're spot on. I mean, look at Google testing out their AI for aggregating search results. I don't know if you have experienced that. I don't know if they rolled that out to everyone. Yeah. The implications of that, I mean, if you draw that out for across every marketplace, the implications of that are kind of wild, where, it brings in a question like, okay, how does SEO affect the way that results are brought up? How will marketplaces, search engines aggregate data? Will they bring my product or my blog post into the search results? Are they not going to? It's an interesting implication for search and for everything else. So I think that's a really, really big one. Anything else? Any other?
I mean, I think the legality of AI is something that I'm interested to see how it goes, especially in the US. I know there's a lot of, it usually happens in the EU first and then kind of trickles down to the US. But I think there's a lot of challenges with how, to your point, how to regulate it. So I think that will definitely change like how we're adopting things or how you need to think about working with different AI companies and things like that. And I don't know what that will look like, but that's something that I'm definitely watching because, to your point, privacy is really, really important. And how do you know where it's pulling it from? And how is it attributing it? How can you make sure that there was permission to do that? Like, there's so many different aspects of that are really challenging. So I think that's another one. And then I think the last one is really accessibility. I mean, ChatGPT has made it accessible to everyone, but in terms of how a brand is using it, I think it's going to be even more accessible because there's going to be more providers that don't just do one thing. Like right now, I think there's a lot of AI players, but it's like they do this one thing and then another one does this one thing. And so you're using so many different technologies. That's never the goal from a brand side. They want to use less technologies, right? They want to consolidate overall. So I think it'll be more accessible where they can use one technology that kind of covers their AI needs for content on the product detail page or for retail media ads or something like that, and make it easier to adopt.
Yep. I think that's spot on. I look at already how fast it's changed from when
it came out.
Yeah. I mean, ChatGPT was not a household name before. It was kind of like, okay, this ChatGPT thing is kind of cool. Like you can make a poem out of pirate squirrels, right? Like, oh, cool. But now, I mean, it's actually legit. Like people were like, oh, who knows what'll happen. Now it's like, no, you guys got to use this thing. So I
there's
think
no denying it's going to fundamentally change things. I just think it's which things at which time to which extent, right?
Yes,
and so
just
how are you preparing for what that is? Because it's always going to take longer to adopt in an organization than it will be like in our personal life, right? Like it helps me plan my trip next week. I'm going to France and it helps me plan my trip. So it was amazing.
I think your point also, my last point here, I think your point also about regulation is an important one. The sense, I'm just speaking as a consumer when I say this, my sense is that AI as a whole is not as regulated likely as it could be at some point in the future. And I will be curious to see how that regulation changes over time. I don't know who that will come from. Now that I don't know if you saw NVIDIA's presentation recently over like robotic robotics.
Oh,
AI.
I did actually. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw it in
it's
one of the newsletters.
it's wild. Like the physical AI adaptation, who knows where the regulation is going to come from? I get the sense that there will likely be some regulation down the line. Again, who knows? That does not mean don't use these AI tools to improve your business. But
100%. But yeah, it has to come, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
I
it's
hope
just
so.
the like.
Honestly, I don't know.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
But it's just the how, right? And I'm wondering if with more regulation comes less access, maybe,
Mhm.
right? Like, do they restrict more? Is there a paywall? Like, I don't know what that looks like, but I do think and hope, to your point, that it will be regulated because it's a lot of data that it's pulling from, and maybe it's not data that you want it to be pulling from,
Right.
and you want it to be accurate. I mean, I don't foresee a world where humans are not in the loop with AI for a really long time. You know?
Yeah, I agree. That's why I made the podcast, because I don't see humans not being in the picture for a bit of it.
No, we're quite important, I think, Cameron.
I think so too. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show. We could keep on going, I feel like, for a long time. But I think that these are two really good areas for people listening to think about. And hopefully we'll have to have you back on the show to dive even deeper. But thank you again for being here. Last question is, how can people get in touch with you to follow you and interact, engage with you?
Yeah, of course. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Lauren Livak Gilbert. Also become a member of the DSI. So if you reach out through the DSI, you can get to me as well. But thank you so much for having me on the show. I would love to come back. It was a great chat. Like I said, love the concept. So thanks for having this human in your loop.
Of course. Thank you very much. I'll be sure to link both of those, your info, LinkedIn, and then the digital shelf information as well. But thanks again.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you so much for joining me on Human in the Loop. I really hope you took some big things away from my conversation with Lauren today. I really liked the conversation around AI. I think that conversation is a fascinating one. The conversation specifically around who knows where it'll be in a couple of years' time from a regulatory standpoint, very fascinating. I hope to have more conversations like that in the future. But for now, very grateful for you for joining me. Very grateful for Lauren. I said this in the episode, but if you want to contact her, I'll put her information in the show notes as well. And thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time on Human in the Loop.